Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the podcast, where today Toby and I are discussing the departures of Enzo Maresca from Chelsea and Ruben Amorim from Manchester United. What went well for them during their tenure, what didn't go so well, and then we'll be talking some big picture ideas about what makes an elite Premier League manager today. I guess the first place to start off with, Toby, is the news that Maresca and Amorim have left. I've given my thoughts on the channel before, but I guess the viewers haven't really heard your thoughts. Was it shock just like the rest of us?
Yeah, they both seemed to kind of come out of nowhere, I would say. I mean, Maresca in particular, it didn't really feel like there was any sort of building pressure from fans. I mean, yeah, Chelsea season hasn't been amazing. Probably hasn't been as good as maybe their expectations were, given how much they spent in the transfer window and potentially the quality of their squad. But certainly not in manager sacking region, I would say. Man United and Amorim, it felt like maybe that it would come at some point, but I definitely don't think it felt like it would come at this point. I mean, both teams are fifth and sixth respectively, very close to the Champions League. And I mean, if fifth place goes down to Champions League football in the Prem like it did last year, then Chelsea are on track to get that. And I think that's where a lot of the difficulty lies, doesn't it? Is maybe where these clubs' expectations lie, and therefore how these managers aren't meeting them. But for me, I think for both of these clubs, they are meeting the expectations of what there should be. But clearly, the board differs in that opinion.
Yeah, I think both teams are doing quite well in the season in terms of where they are in the league. I think both sets of performances haven't been as great as you would like, but you're willing to accept that if you are excited on a weekly basis and that you're close enough to where you want to be by the end of the season and you hope you can put a run. I think really for both of them, they kind of shot themselves in the foot, and maybe it was intentionally because of the fact that they were coming out and speaking against their board and the ownership and recruitment strategy. And I think as soon as you start to have that discontent within yourself, within your own football club, I think that's when it can really cause an issue. And then you have to make a decision. Is it the manager or is it people higher up? And I guess it is easier to sack the manager because you can blame them performances. And it's much easier to replace one manager than several board members, if that's the sporting director, CEO, whoever they may be. So clearly, it looks like both managers decided that they had enough and were. It was. I guess it wasn't old school in terms of having a crash out kind of massive interview, but it definitely did feel like I want the sack. This is me saying I want the sack. Please sack me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, part of it felt like it was less the clubs getting rid of the managers and the managers almost being like, yeah, I'm gonna say what I want. If you don't like it, sack me. Especially in the case of Amorim, coming out in his interview and saying he came to Man United to be the Manchester United manager as opposed to a coach. And I think that's a big reflection probably on a lot of modern football and a lot of big clubs at the moment, is that there's so much pressure and it's so easy to sack a manager. And a lot of the time they're not even making some of the big decisions that is putting a lot of these clubs in difficult positions and potentially not performing as well as they should be. And looking at the way that Chelsea have maybe handled Maresca and their transfer policy and their ownership over the last few years, it feels like a really strange scapegoat of sacking Maresca and getting rid of him when he has actually performed pretty well. And as soon as maybe he goes against that model a little bit in not going to the post-match conference and sort of rumours of not getting along with the board, then they can just get rid of him. And yeah, once the sporting directors and the board can make that decision, just get rid of them, it's a lot easier for them than rather trying to restructure the whole club.
Yeah, and I think honestly, if you focus on Chelsea and Maresca to start with, I think the job he was doing was quite admirable. If we're being honest, the fact that he had no say really in the transfers, players were coming and going, and he didn't have a clue who was there at the club, who wasn't there at the club, and it was such a unique situation at Chelsea where you anywhere else in world football, I'm assuming that if a club sign a player, the manager knows that that player is coming in, or if a club is selling a player, that they know the player is leaving. But I don't really think that's the case at Chelsea, and that must be like one of the most unique football clubs in the world right now. And there's such a spotlight on Chelsea as well because of their past success. That I think that Enzo Maresca did a really, really good job at Chelsea. I mean, when he came in, they were in sixth for the Conference League. He then took them to fourth place, got them Champions League football, won the Conference League, won the first edition of the Expanded Club World Cup in the summer, And now, like you said, they're in touching distance of the Champions League places. Yes, I think it's only 1 win in 7 as the time of recording. So recently the performances have dropped off. But overall, you're looking and going with everything he's got to deal with in terms of just focusing on performances on the pitch. He should still be the Chelsea manager, and I don't think that the majority of Chelsea fans really wanted him to go. There was something building there, and it just feels like a bit of a reset, a bit of a restart. And now you've got to go again and take another manager who might be a risk, who might not work out. And if anything, I just feel like it's a big shame, really.
Yeah, I mean, you could see that when Maresca was like first appointed from Leicester, they saw somebody who had a really good background in coaching. Obviously, had those strong links to Manchester City and Pep Guardiola. Had a fantastic season with Leicester, and you think, okay, this is sort of maybe the next young manager who they can come in, stick with for a long time, and really build something at Chelsea. It felt like that was maybe the direction they were going to go in when he was first appointed. And now this change in manager to Rosenior is like you've said, it's almost like they've gone back to when they first appointed Maresca. And is there really going to be any difference in the way that they play and how well they actually play on the pitch? And personally, I think no. And I also think that maybe they see Rosenior as a little bit more of a yes man. And I think that's what they want. Obviously, with him being at Strasbourg under the same ownership group, that maybe there's a stronger relationship there, and they know that Rosenior is a little bit happier to just stick to the football and almost be more of a coach, and then let other people deal with the, like you've said, the transfers and the direction of the club as opposed to the football on the pitch. And that for me is maybe the key difference between the two. And I don't think that's a good thing, and I don't think that's a good thing for managers in football at the moment. That we're going to lose a lot of these big personalities, those people known as good man managers, and that a lot of big clubs now are maybe just looking for pure footballers, pure attacking football, focus more on the play style as opposed to maybe that how the manager can actually manage. And like you said at the start of the episode, that shift from managers to coaches, this sacking and reappointment of Rosenior, I think, is a clear example of that. Really.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially since there's no guarantee of success with whoever you hire. I think when Manchester City hired Pep Guardiola, I think we all expected it to go well. I don't think anyone expected it to go this well, and credit to Guardiola and City for that. But there was something there when he joined that like if he gets it right, it's probably going to go well. But you don't know that with Chelsea. And when Maresca was hired, it came after the back of a really good season with Leicester in the Championship. So even then, it was a risk. But then it seemed like a risk that was paying off and it was going well. And then to just jeopardize that, because Rosenior, again, like Maresca when he came in, this is a risk. This is a young manager who's still not managed at the very highest in the elite level on his own. And this could go well, like Maresca did during his time, but it also couldn't, and it could blow up in your face, and you end up with another situation a bit like when Graham Potter took over from Chelsea when he joined from Brighton, and you don't know. So that's why I feel like it's such a shame, really, especially for the Chelsea fans. And I do agree with you. I do think I know some Chelsea fans may be saying, well, he's got to be his own man. He's got to have his own identity. He's not necessarily a yes man. And I agree with that. I think, you've got to give your own opinion and your own thoughts on things. And the people at Strasbourg would have signed off and said, okay, this is who Liam Rosenior is. This is the kind of man he is. This is the ideas that he has. But clearly that they think that he's more of a yes man than Maresca is right now. And I suppose the thing is for Maresca, he probably feels entitled to have a little bit more control because he did do really well. And I think that's probably the way it should be, that when you come in as a manager, you have to earn the right to have the more power at a football club. But maybe somewhere in between of a grey area of between a head coach and a manager, so you can say, look guys, I mean, I'm doing a good job and I think I can do an even better job if you do this for me. And whatever that may be, maybe the youth setup, maybe it might be in terms of transfers, but I definitely think he did deserve it. But then Liam Rosenior, he's got to know, and any future manager's got to know that regardless of what they want, they may not get it, and they've got to know that going in. They can't just go in and go, well, I do this, and therefore the club should adapt to me. That's not how Chelsea's going to work going forward.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a big like put off for a lot of managers in the future, because I'll be surprised if Rosenior is there for the full 6.5 years of his contract that he has been offered. Not even as disrespect to him as a manager, but purely to the way that Chelsea are running things at the moment. And you wouldn't be surprised if Rosenior ends up in eventually a similar situation to Maresca. And I think Rossini is actually in a really difficult position now this season, because I think even if he comes in and instantly Chelsea start playing well and they have a really good end to the season, personally, I think there's going to be a lot of question marks and people saying, well, I think we could have had that under Maresca anyway, and that change was just unnecessary and has maybe caused um, like an unnecessary rift between sort of the direction of the club and the direction of the football. And yeah, it's not going to be an easy start for Rosenior because of that. It's not like he's coming into a club in a crisis, and any sort of positive impact is going to be great. It's a really funny one, especially for him to come in mid-season. Like you said, a similar situation to Graham Potter, and we saw how that went. So yeah, I don't know how it's going to go the rest of the season, to be honest. It could go literally any way.
He's got to hit the ground running. He definitely has to do that because if he starts going on a little bit of a bad run, then the Chelsea fans are going to be doubling down on their already anxious nature right now because obviously no one really wants to lose a manager midway through a season because you don't know. It could go well, it could get that new manager bounce, or it could go really badly and then you think yourself, we should have just stuck with the last guy. I think he's got to have a really good first press conference and get everyone on side and let him know that, yes, I'm not that experienced. I'm a new manager coming in, but you're not going to mess around with me. You're not going to push me around. I am my own man. I have qualities that I can bring to the football club, and I think I can do really great things. And he's got to win over those Chelsea fans because if a fan base isn't certain, then that first press conference can be a really good way of stamping your authority down, especially on the media, who will already be smelling blood before he's even been able to be on that touchline for one game. And I think that's what he first needs to do: win the games of football. And if he can just carry on from what Maresca did, rather than revolutionize it, and maybe he can put his own stamp on things in the second season, in this first full year in charge in the summer. But right now, just it's all about getting results. It's always all about getting results. And who knows? Maybe he could surprise a few teams, shake things up a little bit. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does with some of his players because he's playing three at the back with Strasbourg at the moment. I don't think he's going to do that with Chelsea because I envisage he's going to do something similar to what he did at Hull City where he played four at the back. Obviously, he had Liam Delap when he was at Hull City as well on loan. So there's a couple of players there that, he's also been Andre Santos he had at Strasbourg as well. So it's not like he doesn't know any of these players. And he's an English manager, so I'm sure he's been keeping in touch with the Premier League as well. So there are signs, I just don't know which way it's going to go because it's Chelsea. But I hope for his sake it's a positive one.
Yeah, I think that is going to be his direction, like you said, is to just sort of carry on as things are. I don't think we're going to come in and see drastic formation changes, drastic personnel changes. I think he's going to keep things steady, and it's good that it's interesting that you mentioned in terms of how Strasbourg play. I'd be so surprised if he comes in and plays in that system where they have wing backs are super super high and almost like wingers, whereas I think when you look at sort of Chelsea's fullbacks and wing backs, they are more the sort of inverting. I mean, you've got Reece James playing in midfield at the moment. I don't think he'd come in, put him out of midfield, and start playing him almost as a right winger. Um, in the summer, though, I think that'll be interesting. I think that'll be the real time to judge Liam Rosenior, is that when he's able to get his style of play, maybe his players in if he's allowed to, depending on the transfer policy and how Chelsea go. Um, whereas for now, yeah, with only sort of 4.5, 5 months of the season left, really, there's not going to be too much to judge him on, unless things obviously go drastically bad, which I don't think they will. I'd be very surprised.
All go drastically well. We've seen Chelsea managers come in. Thomas Tuchel, obviously the most recent one, who've come in and then ended up winning a trophy, winning the Champions League. I don't think it's outside the realms of possibility that Chelsea go on a cup run because we've seen with the Conference League and the Club World Cup, they do this young squad. They like to rise up to the occasion, but they're not necessarily consistent on a weekly basis. I think they could go on a cup run. I think they could. Why couldn't they win the FA Cup, for example? I think they've got enough quality players, but it's just about getting the Champions League really, and then kind of keeping it quiet, not being the headline, not being in the noise. And I think in terms of next season, I reckon he'll stay with the back four because coming on to Manchester United, I think after seeing all the noise about Ruben Amorim and the formation, three at the back, four at the back, he's going to go, do you know what, I want none of that. And I think he's probably going to go with the back four. What did you make of Ruben Amorim when he got sacked? Because obviously, he basically asked for it by saying he wasn't going to quit in his press conference. But I was surprised because they were close to the Champions League places. They weren't playing great, but they had injuries. They had 3 players away at AFCON. I could see a world where when they get all those players back, they start performing a little bit better, get the points they need, and I think they had a shout. But now I think again a little bit like Chelsea. It's all completely up in the air. You don't know who the manager is going to be for the rest of the season, whether that's going to be an interim or a long term. You don't know who the manager is going to be permanently. And basically, I have no idea what I'm going to expect from Man United this season going forward.
Yeah, and that's what's really difficult with Man United because it definitely felt like there have been improvements, not game by game or week by week, but I just think as a general trend for Amorim under Manchester United, he is starting to get a little bit more out of certain players. I think players are becoming more accustomed to the way that he's playing. Um, and again, I think when you look at the squad and the expectations, I know it's Manchester United. I know they are one of the biggest clubs in the world, but their squad is not much better than getting Champions League football at the moment. I'm sorry, it's nowhere near being in a title race when you compare their squad to the likes of Arsenal, Cities, and even Liverpool, who they're only 3 points behind Liverpool at the moment, who have struggled themselves. But this is what I'm really struggling with at the moment in terms of that expectation. I don't understand what they're almost worried about and why they're pulling the trigger right now. It's not like they're on a 5, 6, 7 game losing run. Yes, they are inconsistent, but they're still in and around those Champions League places. I just I don't really understand what bringing in an interim manager is either, and then resetting it. I don't know where the direction is going. I've really struggled to see it, and yeah, I don't know. Maybe you might have to take over on this one because they're just both so confusing, such strange decisions at such strange times.
It's also because it's Chelsea and it's Manchester United, two of the biggest clubs in England and in world football, and you expect them to be a be a bit more consistent, be think a little bit more long term. But clearly, things behind the scenes are just not going well for those two clubs. Maresca wasn't happy, Amorim wasn't happy, and it's weird because you hear so many reports coming out now after the fact, and I'm not sure what to believe because I'm not sure what is accurate and what's actually spin by the clubs to make themselves look good. So things like Amorim had not an interview, he had an appointment with Jason Wilcox. They had a discussion, and in that they talked a lot of things about the formations, style of play, the lack of attacking football, the lack of goals, the fact that they're not using enough youth players, and all these things that Amram apparently wasn't very happy with, wasn't aligned with Jason Wilcox with. And then when you think of that and you go, okay, well, if he's throwing his toys at the pram after a meeting with Jason Wilcox, and then you go, I can understand that. But then I just don't know if it's spin or not. I don't know if it's actually truth or not. I don't know what's real. I just hear so much PR coming out of Manchester United that you just don't know what to believe. And if I was a fan of Man United, I wouldn't know what to believe. But what I would say is the football has been really, really dull. And I do think that style of play and how entertaining it is for fans to watch is an important thing for managers nowadays. Because when you don't win games of football, when you don't get those points, that's what you fall back on. It's, oh, at least we were entertained. Okay, we might have lost 2-0 away to a mid-table team, but at least we pumped that team 3 or 4-0 at home the other day. So then you can kind of balance it out. I just don't think that there was enough convincing performances where you can go, okay, that's Ruben Amorim's Manchester United. When it works, when it goes really well, that's what we're trying to work towards. I just don't think there were enough of that. And so I think, yes, he probably got sacked for remarks that he's made in interviews, and that being the final straw. But it wasn't entertaining enough, and that was a big factor, I think, in what led to him leaving.
Yeah, and maybe sort of being those sort of 5 or 6 out of 10s every week, as like you say, as opposed to a 8 or a 9 and then a 3 or a 4. You can say, yeah, like you said, when you can see that there's something there, whereas maybe with a stagnant, inconsistent set of results, it's a lot more difficult to sort of justify maybe where things are going. Um, and it's difficult. It's trying to. I've been trying to sort of compare the directions of these clubs and these managers as opposed to maybe the managers who have worked in football and in the Premier League in recent years. Like looking at your Klopp, Guardiola, Arteta at Arsenal, yes, who hasn't won anything but has been one of the longest serving managers in the Prem, and Arsenal having another great season. Klopp and Arteta, they didn't get off to blistering starts, and I think that's a really good point that you made, that you could still see that there was something there in some games. There was a style of play. There were games when they played really, really well. Yes, they may have conceded a lot of goals at the start, but there was something a little bit more exciting. And I definitely think that's something that not only the big clubs are looking for, but I just think every club in the Prem at the moment is so fixated on that attacking possession style of play. And those who aren't playing that just either are getting sacked or are just not even being interested in the roles. Um, for better or for worse, I think it works for some clubs. You could talk about West Ham sacked David Moyes maybe because he didn't play the most entertaining football, and they are looking like they're going to be relegated this season now. And ended up with Nuno Espirito Santo, who in himself is not exactly an attacking manager. So yeah, it's a funny one.
Yeah, yeah. I think with Amorim though, I was I was quite disappointed because I think looking back on reflection, and obviously with hindsight, everyone is a genius, but he was he was always distancing himself between himself and his players and going, "This is what happened before me. This is me and my coaching staff and where we're going in the future." And he was never really calling the Man United team the worst ever in the history, which obviously it was. Look at where they finished in the Premier League last season. But he was also a part of that. He was the manager for the majority of games last season. And it's more like them and me rather than us together. And when you mentioned, like, obviously Arteta and Klopp came in immediately and was like, "Oh my god, I love these players. I tried to sign Divock Origi when I was at Dortmund," and I'm like, "Okay, I'm not sure I believe you, but do you know what? At least you're one of us. I can feel a part of you, and we're gonna go on this journey together, rather than Ruben Amorim coming and going, no, 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 hang on, I'm coming in to help you guys, to help you get to where you want to go, and not that feeling of togetherness really, and that never really changed for me because I always thought it's Amrim sometimes fighting against the players, sometimes fighting against us above him for this is what he wants, this is his vision, and everyone else around him having a different vision, a different idea. And then the more I think about it, I just think to myself, why did Manchester United hire Ruben Amorim in the first place? If you knew he was going to play a formation you didn't want, that wasn't the Manchester United DNA, and if he wasn't going to necessarily give him the time, give him the players in the transfer market, why was he hired in the first place? And I just think they were so desperate at the time that there was no one really else. He was the biggest name in football, and I don't think they had the bravery to go, actually, even though Ruben Amorim is probably the primary choice right now in world football, the next sexiest thing, we're going to go left field. We're going to go for this manager who we think plays and identifies with Man United's DNA more so than anyone else. And then surely, I know it's Man United, there's noise, everyone will go, what the hell are you doing? Who's he? Ineos out, whatever. But in hindsight, that's really what they should have done, and they shouldn't have really hired Ruben Amorim.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about in terms of that cohesion, not just between the manager and the players and the fans, but also to the higher ups. And at Man United, it feels like there's such a disconnect in almost all directions in that sense. You've got like the higher ups talking about like the Manchester United DNA, whatever that is, whatever that means. You've got the fans who I think ultimately just want to win. I don't think they really care how it's played. To be honest, I'd be very surprised if any Man United fans would be against how Amorim was playing when he was first hired, and you can see the success that he had in Portugal with it. And then you've got a manager in Amorim who is quite stubborn in the way that he wants to play, um, and is less focused immediately on results. I think when he first came in, and is looking at the long term sort of footballing vision of the club. So you've got a massive disconnect in the goal of all three of these groups, really. Um, is there ever going to be a manager who can come in and do that? I think that's a really, really high bar to set for a manager to come in, and I don't know who that's going to be, and I think that's the reason why they're looking for a caretaker manager for the end of the season, and it's looking like it's going to be possibly an Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, a Darren Fletcher. I think Van Nistelrooy's been thrown in there as well. It's just names linked to Manchester United, so you have that quote unquote DNA, which I hate the amount that's been thrown around this week, and that there'd be less noise maybe from the fans because it's that connection to Man United as well. When the job comes in the summer as a long term appointment, not a clue, not a clue who that's going to be or what they're going to look for. Do you have any ideas?
Mate, before I give you names, just on that style of play and the Man United DNA, it's so funny because when Erik ten Hag got fired, obviously at the time it wasn't it was bad, but it wasn't the worst ever because they were, I think they were 13th or 14th, but they were within like 5 or 6 points of the top four. And at the time, everyone was saying we need a solid play, we need an identity, we need a coherent patterns of play on the pitch. But now to the end of Ruben Amorim's tenure, Man United manager, people are now going, well, he wasn't part of the Manchester United DNA. But where was this discussion about the Manchester United DNA when Ruben Amorim was hired and going, does he match our DNA rather than him bringing in his own style? The thinking has just not been aligned and clearly been wrong for a very, very long time. And I do agree that's probably why they're going for names associated with the club in the formal capacity in terms of playing. That's why they're going for the likes of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Michael Carrick, Darren Fletcher, John O'Shea, Ruud van Nistelrooy. I think that was it. Yeah, those are some of the most former Man United players who have been linked with the job, who are quite high up on the list actually. And I just went on one of the betting websites, and I just found the 30 most, the highest 30 managers on the odds, and there's some wild names on here. So you got the former Man United players, but then the highest non-former Man United player is Oliver Glasner, which I'm not sure about if he's going to leave midway through a season. Then just below him in sixth place is Gareth Southgate, which I would love to see just for like the social experiment, not because I think it would be a footballing success, honestly. But then you've got some managers like Unai Emery, and I'm like, he's not going to leave Aston Villa. He has complete control. He is a manager at Aston Villa, and he has complete control over the club and the project going forward. And then you've got loads of managers who are going to be out of contract after the World Cup, the likes of Pochettino, Tuchel, who are the other ones? Carlo Ancelotti. There's one more. Germany manager, help me out. Nagelsmann. Nagelsmann as well. I have no clue, mate. Out of all the names, I know you asked me the question, but I've chucked out a bunch more names towards you. Any of them excite you?
None of them excite me. I think the most. It feels like a very non-Man United manager, but I think Gareth Southgate could just be one that they would bring in maybe to try something different, and one that the board know they'd have somebody they can maybe work with a little bit better, and maybe less focusing on like a style of play and the way that they're playing. Um, Otherwise, I just think they're going to get in another manager who's going to play a very different style of play to Amorim, sign a load of players to fit that style of play, not give it time to actually work and the players to adapt to that, and then just have another sacking. I mean, they'd be crazy to do the same again. And I feel like even bringing in a Glasner, I just can't really see the difference. I mean, yeah, he's done fantastic with Crystal Palace, but I don't know. I don't know how much of a difference that is, and it's not just a difference in terms of Amorim. It's a difference of the last 10 seasons and the amount of managers that they've had and sacked and changed, and it just not work. Um, and as always with managers, it's so easy to sack a manager and give them the reason as the the football club going wrong. How many managers have Manchester United hired and they failed, and it needs to start looking at how they're hiring managers is I think is the real issue. No, it doesn't really matter who comes in. They just need to maybe assess it and hire, have a better hiring process for the manager themselves.
Well, that would definitely help. I reckon they also need to back the manager more when they say that this squad isn't good enough and I need these players. I mean, when you think about Jose Mourinho, when he, after a second season, that transfer window, I can't remember from the top of my head, but it was like Fred and like one or maybe two other senior players, and that wasn't enough because he was like, I want a centre back. He didn't get a centre back. Weirdly, then they sacked Jose Mourinho, and then the next guy came in, they gave him a centre back. So I think maybe they need to do a little bit more what Arsenal did was when they hire someone, and I think when Arteta first joined, it was as a head coach. Correct me if I'm wrong, but then after a while, they thought that he is the right man. We're gonna make him a manager and give him a little bit more responsibility, and so maybe you could go that way. I I really really do not know the answer. I mean, the managers who are top, like if I could pick any manager in world football right now that I think would is most likely to give you a positive result and a successful job, I would be Luis Enrique. But I don't think he's going to be leaving PSG. There were some rumors that he was going to be, and he hasn't signed any contract. But his contract doesn't end until 2027, so there's still 18 months left of that contract. So Man United need a manager before then. They can't just hang around before then. So I'm looking at the names. I don't know. I mean, if you think that the manager you want, if you're convinced the manager you want is the right manager, then I'd be willing to wait till later on in the summer, and I would maybe go for Thomas Tuchel. Even though it probably means that your summer transfer plans are delayed, you're probably not going to get the players you want. But if you're convinced that he is the right man for the job, I would maybe go for Thomas Tuchel. Maybe Nagelsmann as second. After that, probably Oliver Glasner third. I don't think Iraola, just because I think that his style of play would cause Man United to have a lot of injuries, and they would need they need more depth in the squad than they have. Yeah, so I would go Thomas Tuchel for Man United personally. Have I given you enough time to think of anyone?
No, I think that's a good shout. I think it's dependent on how the World Cup goes. If it goes a bit badly for England, I don't think that's going to set him maybe on the right path to start with, and there might be more question marks than there would be if it was just announced now. Um, and maybe even if they can get like a pre sort of see like an agreement now with his contract obviously ending with England after the World Cup to start, that could put them in a good position. Um, Nagelsmann, I'm not sure. I really like him as a manager, but I think he is potentially the sort of manager who would come in with a really clear vision and not get that backing. And I think that would be an issue. Whereas I think Tuchel is not a manager who's really set on a style of play and is very adaptable. And I think that would be a really good asset for Man United to have in that sense. Yeah, I think that's what they a manager like that. Tuchel or it's I know it's great. Another ex-England manager in Southgate, just somebody who is not really focused on a particular style of play. I think would be good. And in the meanwhile, I think probably Ole Gunnar Solskjaer makes the most sense. I would say um, is the easiest appointment. I think he'd be happy being there as an interim as well, which I think is what you want. I don't think you want maybe somebody like a Carrick. Who maybe would have their eye on a long term appointment, like secretly. I think you would want somebody who knows they're going to be tempo, and I think Ollie would be the man for that. It's a safe, easy appointment for now.
Do you think Ollie would? Do you think he wouldn't come back? I think if it went super well, and I think the fact that I think Ineos' reputation is a little bit in the mud right now. If it went super well, that there could be enough goodwill that they would bring him back permanently. But I actually think, oh, do I? Yeah,
I think that would be. I don't think they should do that because they could just be like a crazy run of form, and then they just think, oh well, let's just carry it on. I think there needs to be a lot. There's a clearer, longer term plan that needs to be made.
yeah. Actually, now that I think about it, because he was there before, you know it didn't work out. He hasn't done anything since to maybe change your mind that it will work out. Yeah, actually, I maybe would go Ollie to the end of the season. I would not go for Carrick or Fletcher or any of the other guys because if you look at Michael Carrick, obviously was at Middlesbrough for a few years, has been out of a job since last summer. If he did well, then because you don't know that he's failed at Manchester United before at that level, that you would go, maybe he could be the one. Maybe he could be our Arteta. So yeah, I suppose I'd rather go back on the short term rather than go for someone new and then be given the false hope again because with all the former Man United ex-players in the media that go, well, Fletcher or Carrick, they could be the ones. And yeah, actually, okay, you know what? Yeah, I completely agree with you. Let's go with Ollie and then go from there.
Yeah. Who knows what's going to happen this summer? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be one to keep an eye on. And this is the part that I'm really interested in and really want to talk about because, in my opinion, I think that there's when top clubs are firing managers, I don't think there's a name out there right now that you go, right, they're available, you go get them, and they're likely to give you a really good job, and you're gonna have success with them at your football club. And so I wanted to talk to you about the qualities that make an elite Premier League manager right now in 2026 in modern football. Because I guess the first thing to ask is it even a manager or is it a head coach now?
Yeah, I mean, there is a clear shift happening at some clubs. I think Chelsea, Man United, potentially even Spurs are looking at a head coach. And I think part of that is the not the introduction, but the step up of the influence of sporting directors, of directors of football. They are the ones running the clubs, and the head coaches are just doing the training and what the tactics on the pitch. I think also part of that is the shift in appointment to young managers, young, exciting, attacking managers who don't have that managerial experience as much, especially at big clubs. Like you mentioned with Arteta when he first came in, you had our sporting director and director of football, maybe I can't remember what their titles were, dealing with the transfers as opposed to Arteta himself to start before that shift. Once he had been given a little bit more trust. Um, and I think that's a really clear shift at the moment. I mean, the only exceptions I would say in recent years are Guardiola and Klopp as sort of those big characters, those long term managers, and yeah, I don't know exactly what the sort of long term future of management is going to look like for these big clubs, really.
Yeah, and I think I'm with you. I think it's just going to be you're a head coach, not a manager, and you're going to have to work your way into a position where, after so much success on the football pitch and loyalty to a singular football club, that the club goes, actually, do you know what? We trust you, and we might give you a little bit more power. That's essentially what happened with Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool. He ended up doing so well, won the Premier League, won the Champions League, that Michael Edwards and the rest of the scouting department ended up leaving. And as soon as Klopp left, they all suddenly come back because they were like, well, actually, we need you guys now because we don't necessarily have the same trust in our new manager coming in. So yeah, it's a weird one because I think it is generally for the best that sporting directors, CEOs coming in and modernizing football. But I also think that it needs to be a collaboration of ideas, and you can't just have like it is at Chelsea and go, right, we're buying you these players, make them work. That absolutely doesn't work. You need to have a conversation with a manager and go, what do you think you need? This is what we think that you need, and let's come to a joint decision on how we're going to proceed going forward. That is obviously the best case scenario for everyone, but obviously there's going to be a bit of sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. I think the thing that probably annoys head coaches and managers the most is the fact that they're always on the chopping block and the sporting directors are never really on the chopping block. Because in Germany, they're being interviewed every few months to give their thoughts and opinions on how things are going. But here in England, it's all about the managers. If you fail, if you succeed, it's all on the manager. Get all the credit, or in some cases, all the blame.
Yeah, and exactly things like interviews and press conferences. It's so easy for directors of football, owners of the club, to just hide away and just let the managers take on all of this burden, and managers even being asked things that they're not even responsible for, and having to take that is a massive ask, and I think it makes it easier for clubs to make those decisions, put this manager as the scapegoat, get rid of them, and keep their job and keep running things the way that they are. And I think the really key point that you said there is that collaboration between these different groups in terms of you have a data team, a scouting team, the youth setup, and the manager. It's all well and good having these different departments, and I think the value of them is well, it's as good as they are. You can clearly see how football has advanced in the last 10, 20 years by having these developments, and they can do incredible things. But if a data team is pulling out uh, a fullback who scored 20 goals last season, but the manager wants to play defensive football, what is the use of that if they're not working together? And I think when you look at maybe clubs a little bit lower down that is getting that balance right is like your Brightons and your Brentfords, and I think especially Brentford under Thomas Frank had such an influence on how these different departments were run and was the clear center of how the club operates, and there was a really good relationship between him and the board and everything. And now when you take Thomas Frank, who is an amazing football manager and a great sort of football IQ, take him out of that setup and put him into a brand new setup in Tottenham where he doesn't have that influence yet. Maybe he isn't trusted as much. He hasn't almost set it up himself and had a big influence of it. And you can see that it just doesn't work as well as it has and as well as it would. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see the direction of the clubs, whether they are just bringing in these young managers, fit them into the club system, or if there ever will be that allowance for them to sort of set things up and work together a little bit more.
Yeah, and I guess it all comes down to, well, for me at least, I think it comes down to the experience of the manager, like you said, the inexperience versus the experience. Because if you're Carlo Ancelotti and you're going into a club in club football, apart from probably Real Madrid, you're going, I feel like I've got a pretty good understanding of what's going on. You know, he's called Don Carlo for a reason. He's won so many major trophies. And if you say you're just going to get these players, he's well in the right to go, nah, do you know what? I don't fancy it here. Or if Pep Guardiola was available to a team in Europe, let's say it's Juventus in Italy, they go, oh no, of course, yeah, manager, yeah, you want control of players, come and go, yeah, absolutely, not a problem. Why wouldn't you? I think we're getting to a point now where managers, well, the new set of coaches coming into coaching in football, they will have never been a manager, so they'll never know what being a manager was like, and therefore we'll just get to the point where it's just head coaches around and there won't be managers. But if that were to happen, which I think is going to happen because that's the trend that we're heading into, then sporting directors need to be under even more scrutiny than they are. It's not just the managers. It can't be just the managers. It needs to be the sporting directors as well. And you need to look at go, okay, well, three managers hasn't worked under this one sporting director. Maybe we need to change the sporting director. And they need to have a little bit more accountability because if the managers are going to get, if they're going to be doing all the interviews, getting all the blame, all the credit, it's great when it works, but when it doesn't, it's not always just the manager's fault. It's the player's fault, it's the sporting director's fault, it's the coach's fault. There's a whole team around the manager or the head coach which is responsible for it not working out. And so I think there needs to be a little bit more accountability because I would look at Liverpool, for example, my club, and go, I don't know who brought in these players in the summer. Most of them are good, but they don't fit all together in a coherent system. And am I blaming Arne Slot for that, or am I blaming Richard Hughes for that? And I don't know. And I would like to know, because if it's not Arne Slot's fault, I don't want to hold it over his head. I want to blame Richard Hughes. And when it comes to accountability, I want Richard Hughes' head to roll, not the manager's. And it's all just, it's becoming less coherent. Whereas in the past, you could go, okay, the manager has to go, it's their fault. And you could blame them. And I think it would be quite fair in blaming them.
Yeah, it's especially uh, prevalent in terms of when the manager doesn't have that overall control. You have to look at who has the most say at the club is going to be the one who is not performing as well as they should be. And when that those areas of responsibility taken away from a manager, there has to be more leniency given to them. And I don't think that has reflected, especially in English football. And I think probably because of the managers that have been so successful in England, looking at your Sir Alex Ferguson's, your Wenger, your Mourinho, back when they were at their peak in sort of the early mid 2000s, they had the entire say of how the whole club was run. I mean, when you had Wenger coming in, completely changed the way that Arsenal's nutrition was worked, completely changed the way that their youth setup played. Whereas now you've got the manager would be not even related to any of that anymore, just doesn't even have the opportunity to have an input on that, let alone be the one to sort of controlling it. And yeah, it's very unfair the way that blame is still passed on to managers when football clubs have just advanced so much in the last 10, 20 years that yeah, it can't all be on the manager for sure.
So if we're trying to think to ourselves and put ourselves in the shoes of, say, sporting directors, and we're looking at managers slash head coaches now, you don't have to put a name out there, but what qualities are you looking for in a top elite manager to, say, manager Chelsea or Manchester United or any of the clubs in the top six or the big six, actually? What qualities are you looking for, and what qualities do you think are necessary for them to be successful?
Yeah, and I was going to say in that question is that also what do I think they should have or what other clubs looking for? Because I think that is also a massive thing at the moment.
Well, you can answer both the questions since you phrased them. Yeah, what do you
Yeah,
want? Okay, let's start with what do you want in a manager?
what I want to manage is somebody who is wanting to play a clear style of football, is happy to commit to that. I think that's a really important thing. I also think I want a manager who doesn't shy away from criticism. Is happy to, I think, to take that on themselves and to also build that relationship. I think, like you said, with players and fans as well, and not have excuses as like I think if a manager can come in and say yeah, I got this wrong, or oh, it's not my players. They played really fantastically. We were just unlucky today. To sort of protect those players and build that relationship, I think is really, really key. Um, and I think managers can sometimes have that disconnect, which I think is always a slippery slope. I would want a manager as well to come in and be the manager. I want them to have a say on the youth academy. I want them to have a say on all the training. I want them to have a say on all the transfers, because otherwise you don't get that cohesion. That is a really, really important one for me. Whether that's immediately done or there's at least a plan for them to get that in the short to medium term, I think is really important. What clubs are looking for, I think they're looking for attractive football. They're looking for young managers that maybe they can have a bit more influence on, which I don't think is the right direction, um, and where some clubs are maybe messing up. Um, yeah, I think there's maybe a little bit of difference between what the fans and what the players maybe want from a manager and what the clubs want. And yeah, I don't see that sort of narrowing and those views sort of combining anytime soon. How about you?
Yeah, I agree with most of what you said there. I think the one place where both managers slash head coaches and sport directors and clubs definitely agree on is they want to win and they want to be successful, but they just have different ideas of how they're going to go about it. And for me, I think if you want to be an elite Premier League manager, I think that you need to have almost have a career already in the bank and you need to have an impressive CV. So I think for me, if you're going to like one of the big six and you want to try and take them to helping them win the Premier League and winning Champions Leagues, I think it would be nice if already on your CV you already had evidence of having success in your domestic league, wherever that is, whether that's in Germany, Spain, Italy, Holland, Portugal, wherever that may be. I'm not entirely sure about Scotland. Scotland just catching random strays here, but I don't think like Ange Postecoglou come from Celtic, or Brendan Rodgers when he moved to Celtic and came back to join Leicester City. Sure, that can be an indication, but I want success in the big league in Europe, coming up against giants of football, behemoths who are expected to win the title. And I think this is literally it's just Jurgen Klopp. It's Jurgen Klopp winning with Borussia Dortmund, usurping Bayern Munich. I think that's why Xabi Alonso was in such high demand when he went from Bayer Leverkusen, because Liverpool wanted him, Bayern Munich wanted him, and ended up going to Real Madrid, who also wanted him. But even that, Klopp worked out, but Xabi Alonso at the moment is having a little bit of a difficult time. But who knows? You got to give him time. So I want proven success in a big domestic league. I'd say I want them to be given time. I really do want them to be given time. I think that's so important. I think Maresca season and a half, Ruben Amorim 14 months. You don't know really how it would have gone, but you have an indication that, especially under Amorim, it probably wasn't going to work. And I think you want them to almost be like a statesman-like figure. So, like you said, with the media and things like that, you want them to put the club on their back and go, right, this is the direction of the football club we're going in. Everyone, follow me. I know what I'm doing. I've got the evidence. I've done it before, so I know what I'm doing. You can trust me on this, and we're all going to go in this direction together. And it's going to be a journey. It's going to be one hell of a ride, but we're going to get there together, and we're going to enjoy it. I just don't think nowadays people have the patience, and the managers don't get given the time, which is why sometimes I don't think that they're as open as they want to be in press conferences, because they're afraid that it will backfire on them. And I just don't, and I think they don't necessarily show enough sometimes. Like I said, they need to have a convincing like 4-0, 5-0 win of, oh, this is my football, this is how it looks when it works. And if they don't get enough time to do that, and they don't get enough money to do that, yeah, I think it's really tough being an elite football manager at the top level nowadays. Because I think you can be a mid-table manager and do okay. I think you can be a manager of a team in a relegation race and do okay. You just have to stay in the league. I think that's a lot easier because things like style of play don't matter. It's just about staying in the league. So I think that's why they get paid the big bucks ultimately, is because they've got so much on their plate that they need to consider all of these different factors, plus the youth setup, plus the transfers, like we didn't even talk about. It's almost impossible, and that's why most managers do fail at the elite level.
Yeah, and I think with the little time that managers are given to be successful in the Premier League, it's so difficult for clubs to find a manager who has already been successful in the Premier League, or even elsewhere. yeah, that's such a. It's like with Iraola, for example. Maybe last season Bournemouth were really good. They started this season fantastically. They've now had a massive drop off. Is his future even safe at Bournemouth come the end of the season? And that's a manager lost who could have been appointed by a Big Six club, because you've seen that in spell. Whereas maybe if he is given next season as well, and you could see Bournemouth shoot up to fifth, sixth, you have no idea. And with the chop and change nature of the Premier League, it's really difficult, I think, to have a manager to have a consistent spell at a club now, and have sort of consistent success before moving to one of the Big Six clubs. Whereas now we're seeing top six clubs almost skipping out that step entirely, and doing maybe what we would have seen teams in the lower half of the league, even in lower divisions, do, and taking in new managers from ex players almost immediately. Looking at your sort of Artetas and your Alonso's, just they haven't really got any experience before they have that big break, and to have that is rare. It is really really rare, and it seems like clubs are still looking for that, which they don't come around often at all.
No, it's kind of like creating your own manager, kind of like you do with a youth player, and just hoping that kind of works out, which is a mental thing to be doing at the elite level. I mean, what they're doing in those PowerPoint presentations to show the style of play and how they're going to take the club forward, I don't even know. But you make an interesting point. I mean, how do top clubs find managers? Most of them, there's a constant merry-go-round of managers, like we talked about for Man United. I mean, the likes of Xavi Hernandez and etc., who just go around from big club to big club to big club and manage them. Once they get to that certain level, there's other managers who you try and plug from thin air, like you said, with like the Artetas. Enzo Maresca was a massive leap from Leicester City to Chelsea. And then you got the managers who are kind of in the mid to lower tables of domestic leagues, and you're trying to pick them and trying to go, okay, you've shown promise. Could you be the next guy? But that there's no guarantee of that working. When was the last time that worked? I mean, did Brendan Rodgers work at Liverpool? Kind of, maybe he got them back to competing. Did Is Thomas Frank working well at Spurs right now? He's having a tough time, even though we both agree we think he's a really good manager. And then the most tried and tested, I suppose, is trying to pick an elite manager from another big league. But sometimes even that doesn't work. I mean, previously, like Klopp, Guardiola, Conte, that Mourinho, that seemed to be the way to go. Wenger, if you want to go that far back. I mean, Sir Alex Ferguson, if you want to go that far back. But now even that, there's no guarantee of that, because Ruben Amorim failed, and Manchester United really, I think we can categorically say that Arne Slot is having, after winning the league, is having a terrible time with Liverpool right now. I guess each situation is unique in their own instance, and you can't really. It's difficult to compare completely one situation to another. But ultimately, I guess you just don't really know. It's just about finding the best fit for you in that instance. And I don't think you should be looking too far back. So I think, like Man United, I don't think they should be looking at, we've tried this, and this, and so we need to try something completely different. Maybe one of those things they did try previously was the right thing to do in that situation, and maybe it's the right thing to do now, but it's all about timing. And so I don't think you should just completely discount everything you've tried before either.
Yeah, and it's frustrating as well, because I think with some of those Manchester United managers haven't been given a bit more time. It could have been the right appointment, maybe at the right time, or like you said, maybe just a year or two early, a little bit more time, and things start to click a little bit better. Um, but with the immediate need for results in the top Premier League sides, if you're not doing it in your first season, it's just not enough. The Champions League football is such a massive impact financially on these clubs that they need to get it every year, and the risk of not getting that is is bigger than the risk of sacking a manager, and it maybe not being the long term project that they first thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and I do sometimes wonder if maybe the financial rewards are too high, that there's too big a gap. And I mean, I often thought the gap is too big financially between Premier League and the Championship, for example. But now I'm thinking, is it too big that if you don't get the Champions League, it's basically a massive, massive blow financially for a club? I mean, not that they can't recover, because these are, like I said, gargantuans of football, but is it so much that it costing managers' job? Maybe. I mean, I can see, I can see a world if Liam Rosenior doesn't get Chelsea into the Champions League, that he might be gone. If the Man United manager, who's the interim, they get the top four, then maybe they could get the job. It's like it's that much. It's it's so crucial. It's so important it almost becomes everything. And sometimes you think to yourself, ugh, I mean, it's fine if you drop out for 1 year. I mean, why are you calculating the finances so you have to be in the Champions League? Why don't you go, it's sport, it's competition, we can't always be in there. So if you're not in the 1 year, I mean, Liverpool weren't in there for 1 year, we were in fifth and we had to go to the Europa League. And it can happen, but I guess Liverpool trusted the manager in Jurgen Klopp. Whereas I suppose you don't know if you can trust the manager because they're not there for long enough. So it's just one big circle, isn't it?
Yeah, and that just goes back to the meme of Arsene Wenger, staying on maybe 8, 9, 10 years more than he should have because he just kept getting top four. Arsenal weren't challenging for titles. The club were just happy to keep him there because it was consistently top four. Um, and yeah, maybe some clubs would absolutely love a manager like that now, just to get them consistent top four, set them up well, and then be pushing for those titles, as opposed to sort of up down up down.
Isn't that what Arteta's doing right now with Arsenal?
You won't be saying that when we've won the quadruple, mate. That's what I'm saying. We're in them all.
Yeah. Win them all. Okay. Well, is there anything else to say, or is that everything that we think makes an elite manager?
Yeah, I think we've had more than enough manager discussion, and yeah, we'll have to see how Rosenior does at Chelsea, see how the interim does at United, and see who United go for in the summer. That'll be a big indication, maybe, of where the direction of the club is heading.